Welcome to Exploring Islamic Cuisine in Medieval Times. In this podcast, we'll explore the fascinating history of food and its cultural impact. I'm Abiyan Asad, and today we're diving into the influence of Islamic cuisine on medieval European food culture, from new ingredients and cooking techniques to dietary practices. Together, we'll uncover how Islamic culinary traditions left a lasting mark on Europe's culinary landscape. To truly grasp the impact of Islamic cuisine on medieval Europe, we need to start with the spice trade. The spice trade was crucial to European commercial development in the later Middle Ages. Exotic Eastern spices such as saffron, cinnamon, and cloves became. Now we will dive into some specifics. Medieval European cooking styles heavily borrowed from Arabic cuisine. This is evident by the recipes that reflect a sophisticated use of spices. For instance, in the form of curry, a late 14th century English cookbook assigned to the master cooks of King Richard II, we see numerous recipes calling for spices like ginger, saffron, and pepper. These were not native to Europe and were often introduced through trade with the Islamic world. The demand for these spices wasn't just about flavor. As highlighted in the article from Science Direct, the culinary shift among Europe's elite around 1300 was influenced by the Muslim theological portrait of the Gardens of Delights, which emphasized the pleasures of eating. The use of exotic spices was a way to recreate this rich and pleasurable dining experience. Moving on to cooking techniques, Islamic cuisines introduced several methods that were adopted and adapted by many European cooks. The use of complex spice blends and techniques for cooking meat were particularly influential. In comparing European and Arabic cooking styles, we find that European cooks began to adopt methods such as marinating meats in spice mixtures before cooking, a technique common in Islamic culinary traditions. Again, the form of curry provides evidence of this influence, with recipes that require spices to be ground and mixed in specific ways to enhance the flavor of dishes. Liber do Cocaina, in a medieval cookbook that talks about cooking techniques such as stewing and braising. This cookbook also contains slow cooking techniques that were developed in Islamic cuisine. Additionally, the detailed exploration of Muslim heritage shows how these techniques were not just limited to spices, but extended to broader culinary practices. The use of sugar in both sweet and savory dishes, for instance, became more common in Europe following its introduction from the Islamic world. Combining Islamic cuisine with European dietary practices also reflected broader cultural exchanges. Around 1300, there was a noticeable culinary shift among Europe's elite, who began to favor the rich and varied flavors in Islamic cuisine. The shift wasn't just about taste, but also about adopting the cultural and social practices associated with these foods. Muslim theological depictions of the Garden of Delights played a significant role here. These depictions highlighted the central pleasures of eating, which resonated with Europe's aristocracy. They began to see food not just as nourishment, but as an experience, a philosophy deeply rooted in the Islamic culture. The Liber di Cocaina also highlighted the use of medicinal ingredients in both European and Islamic cuisine. Furthermore, the influence of Islamic agricultural practices and medical knowledge cannot be overlooked, as detailed in the Out of the East, Spices and the Medieval Imagination by Paul Friedman. The introduction of new crops farming techniques revolutionized European agriculture, leading to a more diverse and rich diet. The medical knowledge from the Islamic world, which often linked diet to health, also began to fill European thought, influencing dietary practices among the elite. So, to summarize, Islamic cuisine's influence on medieval European food culture was profound. The introduction of new ingredients like exotic spices, new cooking techniques, and dietary practices transformed the culinary landscape of Europe. The culinary shift among Europe's elite, driven by the luxurious and sensual depictions of food in Islamic culture, marked a significant cultural change. I hope you enjoyed this exploration into the history of food in the Middle Ages. Thank you for listening to Exploring Islamic Cuisine in Medieval Times.